Hello and welcome to the Autocar Podcast, My Week in Cars with Pry here. Croppy there. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, mate. How's it going?
Very good, mate. Very good. This podcast is brought to you, listener, in association with our sponsor, Anderson. Visit anderson-ev.com to see their full range of electric chargers. Premium design focused as they are. This week, Steve and I are going to be at the Norton factory to talk to Gerry McGovern.
It's a good thing to do, isn't it? I mean, think about how many times his name's come up in recent, in past months.
A quick run through of his sort of career to date. Then I suppose it was at MG Rover, even in the 90s.
Yeah, he was educated, I believe, in Coventry. Went to a design school. He was interested in all sorts of things: architecture, product design. Just by chance met Roy Axe, who was a car designer of some fame, who eventually went to Rover Group, I think. Mm-hmm. Took Gerry with him. Gerry was involved in the design of the MGF and the MG EXE, lovely, remember the concept car?
Oh, yeah.
And the first Freelander.
Mm-hmm.
And then he buzzed off to America for a while, worked for Lincoln, I think, Ford and Lincoln.
Yeah.
Then came back to Land Rover, where he very much made his reputation, and I think he did something like 3 generations of Range Rover Sport, 2 generations of Range Rover, the Discovery and the Defender, of course, the new Defender.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he was made overall JLR design guru and was involved with the Concept 00 Jaguar, the car that is still controversial and we still haven't seen in production form.
And then has been involved with Norton for a little while, even while he was at JLR, and then his time at JLR came to a, how to describe it, controversial end? Controversial is not quite the right word, is it? But somehow sort of, an end.
Yeah, there were all these stories about him being sort of escorted out, but in fact, he explains it quite well on the pod, doesn't he? In fact, in a minute or two, he's going to explain to us how it happened. I mean, it's very much his version of events, but he, he's, as he says, and as the official announcement said, he left on good terms. He still drives around in a Range Rover.
Well, he arrived in an Octa Defender, so it can't be that bad.
No.
So, right. Well, thanks for joining us. Here is the interview. Well, I'm delighted to say that Steve and I are joined by Professor Gerry McGovern, OBE, Chief Creative Advisor at Norton. Gerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Steve, lead us in, mate.
Well, Gerry, it's so great to talk to you. Quite a lot's happened in the last, since we spoke probably 18 months or something ago, I don't know. Lots of ups and downs, lots of people filled in dots that weren't there. So what we thought we would do is come round and see you in your new environment at Norton, where you are, as Matt says...
Well, it's not a new environment. I've been here for years. But
new to us. Sorry, beg your pardon.
Yes.
But tell us what... You were last seen at JLR. The JLR was in the throes of revealing an important new Jaguar. What happened? Why?
Well, I think there's a lot of things being written. There was a lot of disinformation out there. I'd been the reality, and it came out in the formal announcement about me leaving, which was that I decided that I wanted to move on and I wanted to try other things. I'd been at JLR for 24 years, something like that. I'm very proud of what I did there and with the teams. I had a great time there. There was some, we did some great stuff. But there comes a point where how long can you go on going through those? I'd done so many generations of, I think 3 generations of Range Rover Sport, 2 generations of Range Rover, 3 generations of Evoque, 2 generations Range Rover Sport, 2 generations of Range Rover, the new Defender, which was 3, all of those things. It was a lot, and then with the Jaguar, it was always in my mind, I'll have a go at Jaguar, and then when that's done, I want to go on to other chapters. And I'd been talking to the company about it for quite a while. So it was a natural progression for me. I just think maybe, I don't know what went on with all sorts of rumours or whatever, speculation, but it was all pretty inaccurate. It was quite, I wouldn't say it was amusing, but it was interesting to watch.
Have you is that, you feel you've put that stuff behind you now?
Yeah. I mean, I've moved on, and I wish, JLR. I love those brands. You can't walk away from them. When I still see a Range Rover on the road, or when I'm in London, I see all these Defenders, and I think, 20 years ago when we were talking about Defender being in the urban environment, I used to get laughed at. In the same way, you couldn't call an Evoque a Range Rover, or, you see, it's that thing about Defender. It started off in the jungle, and now it's in the urban jungle. The same with Range Rover. So those brands are really dear to my heart. I'm still very passionate about them, and I just wish them.
Always will be, I suppose.
Yeah, they always will be.
Have you got? Do you drive around in anything like that?
Of course. I mean, the company were very good to me, and I have. I've got a Defender Octa, and I have two at the moment, but I could have a Range Rover or whatever. So,
tiny sets of wheels.
I don't walk away from it, and I'll be observing what they're doing and sending them notes when I think they need advice or whatever. It was very amicable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But you had, by the time, that you walked away, as you say, you had roots here at Norton for really some years. Didn't you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, because I met Sudarshan Venu and his father, because in India the Venu is the surname of and it's a Christian name of the son. It's slightly confusing, but I met them.
These are the bosses of TVS.
These are the owners
TVS.
of TVS.
Right.
Yeah. And I met them through Mr. Tata, and they used to come to the studio at Gaydon because they're very big supporters of the JLR brands. I mean, they've got lots and lots of Range Rovers, Defenders, and Venu, the father. He was on the TV on the the Tata board of trustees. So there's a lot of connections there, and I started helping. They asked for some advice selecting architects, because that was one of my interests as well, architectural design. In fact, we're working with Foster and Partners now as a consequence of Sudarshan. It started with that, and then it went on to other things, and I was with Sudarshan. In fact, the night that he told me that they'd just bought Norton, he was very excited about it.
That was 2020, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And a few days later or whatever, he said to me, he said, "Would you like to get involved in helping us develop the brand strategy, helping us develop a professional design organisation, coaching and mentoring the people?" And first of all, I needed to get JLR to agree to that. The good thing is, it's not a conflict of interest. One's two wheels, one's four, and they're completely different from each other. And that's how it started. And it did intrigue me, but the thing that really pushed me towards it is the fact that if design is truly going to be embraced, design creativity in whatever manifestation, it has to be done right from the top of the business. And if you look at Sudarshan, who, he's not, I don't think he's 40 yet. He's a visionary, and he really embraces the importance of creativity and design, and he celebrates it, and he was serious about it. And when you've got that sort of support at that level in a business, design is going to get where it needs to be eventually. Because remember, TVS as a company, design would have, generally sat within engineering, because it's very much about commodities, volume, and they've been incredibly successful. But of course, Norton is a different animal altogether. We use the word luxury, but let's say high end. But also TVS have aspirations in Europe to elevate to another level as well. So I found it very intriguing. And at the moment, because I've got a bit more time, I'm helping them as much as I can, and it's a real pleasure to work with them.
There's a design chief here called Simon Skinner, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I gather you and he have hit it off pretty well.
Yeah, Simon Sudashan said to me, look, we've got the chief designer in Norton, this guy called Simon Skinner, why don't you go and meet him, tell us what you think. Well, what do I know about bike design? But anyway, there was a little bit of trepidation because I thought, look, Simon's a bike designer, I'm a car designer, but there are similarities. But what really impressed me about Simon was the way he embraced me. He didn't see me, he knew I was coming to help him. I mean, up until that point, he'd been designing bikes on his kitchen table. I mean, I exaggerate slightly, but I came in to help him and think about how can we grow this into a professional design organisation. What are the processes you've got to have? What's the design strategy we need? How are we going to make Norton relevant in a modern context and make it a true luxury brand or a higher end brand? So, it started with, we virtually spent all day at the Heritage, the motorbike museum, and we spent a lot of time looking at Nortons of the past to see if there were any salient points that would help us. I don't believe in retro design, and he doesn't either. But was there anything there from a sort of heritage perspective? Because heritage, as you know, is always important to a luxury brand. And what we discovered was it wasn't so much that there was a particular DNA that ran through everything. I mean, the colour was one thing after the 50s that started to give them uniformity. But from a pure design perspective, it was more about the fact that in their day, all these bikes were quite modern and forward-looking for their day against the competition. And that was the thing that struck us. And after that, it was about trying to develop a design strategy that we could design a portfolio of bikes for.
He says he credits you with coming up with this recipe that will work for a whole range of bikes. And one of the things that struck us, Matt and me, as we were looking at them, is this reductionist approach. We've just been looking at rival bikes against the two current Nortons, and they are both remarkably simple's the wrong word. You'll have a term for it. Yeah, reductive.
And in fact, that was one of the first things we put on I always work on, I think if you're developing any brand, you've got to think about it from a brand perspective first. What's your brand world? What's its reason for being? Where was it born? When was it established? What were its values? You think of something like Defender. It was born in the country, It was about liberating people. It was about adventure. It was about being purposeful. And all those things came together. It then informs the way it's designed, the design DNA. And it was that, and I've used that with Range Rover and Jaguar to a degree as well as one of the last things. And that was the approach. And modernity was one of the first things that we wrote down. And Simon said to me, well, what do you mean by that in the context of a motorbike? And I said, well, when I look at a motorbike, because I've always liked bikes, but I was always into cars, but my brother had a bike and I rode race bikes, push bikes, and I was banned from them after a while because I had a couple of little accidents. But I've always looked at them visually because of their scale. But I said, I've noticed with a lot of bikes now, there's so much going on you can't see the wood from the trees. And for me, part of my design philosophy has always been, you read it in three. First look, second look, third. First look is proportion. Second is surface. Third is detail. When you look at a bike, it's different because the first is proportion, overall profile, but then it's detail, and then it's surface, because there's less surface and there's so much detail because of all its mechanical exposure, which is a fundamental difference between a car and a bike. A car, you can hide a lot of sins. You don't see all those mechanical parts. The other interesting thing I said to him is the person riding the bike becomes part of the design because he's exposed. So therefore, what they're wearing is really important.
Yeah.
So it's more, so it flows with the harmony of the bike. So that's something
He put it really well. He said, you sit on the A surface.
Yeah, you do sit on the A surface.
Which is...
So I said to, how do we reduce the amount of visual noise? So that's where the reductiveness came from. But you can't just clad everything. And actually, those details can become... So, you've got modernity. Pare it back as much as you can. But then, how do you make... We use the term integrated. How do we make these parts that are exposed look more integrated rather than looking like a bag of spaghetti or whatever? And so that was another important element. And then there was that thing about drama. How do we maximise drama in some of the bikes, particularly the Manx R? And it was interesting how it sort of evolved, and also the processes. I mean, if you compare the process of designing a bike to a car, there are similarities, but a car is much bigger. And it is more complex because there's a lot more stuff. And when you compare the sort of what's important, the big difference is, one you're exposed, the other one you're not. One, you're hidden in this vehicle. It carries more people. It's bigger. You're exposed to all the elements, all those things. But then when you go drill down, what are the things that where they're similar? So proportion, people say in the bike industry they're not bothered about the design. Rubbish. A lot of people will say they're not bothered about the design, they're more interested in the way it rides, it handles, and same with the car. They like to say that to post-rationalise, to justify why they've made it. Yeah. And the biggest thing that pulls them both together, a car and a bike, both have the ability to resonate with people on an emotional level. You don't need a luxury Range Rover, you don't need a luxury Norton, but you desire one. And they're not just commodities. So it's that thing about emotional resonance that is so important. How do you get the character? And then the element you mentioned that Simon said about look at the whole portfolio together. These bikes are going to do different things for different people, but what are the salient points that pull them all together so that when you see them together, they all have their unique personalities, but you can see that they come from the same family without looking like a Russian doll sort of.
Yeah. Do you think the thing that struck me when looking at particularly the Manx R was against some of the opposition, but probably better not name them, is that whereas the overall look of that bike, the sort of surfacing was more of a priority than it was in the opposition. I was surprised how they just seemed to clad the mechanicals and be done with it. It's really not very well done.
Well, I think the difference is this thing. It's interesting now that we have Nick here. Nick Rogers, who I've worked with for many years at JLR, and we come from the same sort of philosophy. In that, in the old days, and if we look at a car, the engineers, God bless them, would or the product development people would develop. That's the platform. That's where the wheels go. That's where the engine is. This is where the hard put. This is where the people are going to sit. It's going to be this. And then, now can you make it look good? Sorry, the horse is bolted. You have to start with a concept. What do you want this product to be? You know, what's the brand? What's its value? What is its purpose? So what are the types of products you want? And then you define a product conceptually, and then you say to the engineers, now find a way of making that work. It's a totally different way of working. And in the bike industry, they work that way. They'll engineer it, and then they'll say, can you make it look good? And design isn't a priority. You can tell it's not a priority because you see all these, you know, horrible pieces of angle iron, or a tube here, a tube there, a bolt. Whereas here, we've turned that round, where
So
everything's important visually.
Right. These two bikes, the Atlas and the Manx,
Yeah.
have both been built according to those principles.
Yeah. All of the new, you know, the Atlas, the Manx R, and there'll be something else coming soon, and there'll be more. All of them are built on that philosophy. And what was interesting was when I came here, I didn't get any pushback on that because I thought, you know, what does he know about bikes? I think I know how to make them look good. I think I know how to make a lot of things look good, but Simon is the expert. But they embraced it, which was really good. I always remember, you know, because people say to me, and the general view is that when you're doing a luxury item, whatever it is, the more important design becomes as you go up. And by the way, I'm not happy unless these things, you know, from an engineering perspective, are engineered brilliantly. They handle, they ride like a dream in the same way like a car is. You know, you talk about the new Jaguar, that thing will drive like a dream because I've driven it. I think you did, didn't you?
I went in it, Matt's driven it.
I've driven it on ice.
Yeah.
And
It's
got
amazing.
that Jaguar low P.
Yeah.
You know.
But the I'm losing my train of thought here.
Well, you were talking about the importance of design. Just because it's nicely designed doesn't mean it doesn't.
And you know, people say that general view is if it's a luxury item, design becomes increasingly important, right? But I'd say equally, design's just as important even at a commodity level. I always remember a lovely quote from my old friend Ralph, and he said,
Ralph Smith.
I don't know if he nicked it from me, but it's a brilliant quote. He said, you may think the cost of good design is expensive. Maybe he was referring to my salary at the time, I don't know. He said, but you want to look at the cost of bad design, which was a great comment. So, but it has to be embraced at the top.
Yeah.
And that has to work its way down.
Do you think you're going to change? When I looked at those two bikes, the Atlas and the Manx, I found myself thinking that this might well change the priorities of some of the opposition, because they look crude alongside what you've created.
I mean, you know, one of the things I do, you know, it's quite often we used to go in there and I'd look at the competition and just take no notice of them, and I'd say to Simon, because it's the same, you get the well, we need to have this. Forget all that. What do you want this to be? We want it to be a lot better. And they do when you look at the ones that are coming, and I'm not naming who the competition is, there is a massive, I think, delta in terms of, what I've tried to do here is not tell Simon what to do, but it's help elevate the importance of design. But it's design and engineering together.
You've always done that, though, haven't you?
And you know, Simon might say, well, if we lower the, you know, in India, for example, where the roads aren't as good, you have to have a bigger gap between, you know, your riding position. Well, fine, if that's what you got to have, then do it and find a way of still making it look good. And when you put it in Europe, just lower it, whatever. There has to be a level of pragmatism to it. I think what I've learnt over the years is being a perfectionist will kill you. So there you have to learn to work with what you've got.
So you wouldn't see yourself as a perfectionist, or would you?
I am a perfectionist in my, you know, visual aesthetics, in what I aspire to. But I think you have to remember that we're creating industrial products, and there has to be a level of balance.
Yeah.
And you don't want the design to compromise the the engineering, but you don't want the engineering to compromise the design either. So you've got to get to a balance. It depends what your priorities are.
But you're famous for making sure that the engineering priorities didn't overtake. I mean, I think of there's plenty of examples that you could rattle off, no doubt, but the one I think of is the way the Evoque maintained it came out as a beautiful concept car, and it went into production as a beautiful car.
I'll tell you a good example there, and this is the engineers. You know, when we did the concept car, it was all about the drama of that car. It had this sort of dramatic rising belt line that gave it that forward thrust, the falling roof, that narrowed it right down the back so you couldn't really see out the back. And I remember the engineers, God love them, say, Gerry, can we lower the waistline a bit? Can we lift the roof line a bit? And I said, yeah, you can, but you're just normalising it. You'll lose its drama, because that design was simplicity is always complex, but the rudimental lines, falling roof, rising belt line, wheel at each corner, minimum overhangs, that's its character. Start lifting the roof up. Yeah, I'm comparable in terms of roof height with something else, but look how boring that is. What do you want?
Yeah.
Do you reckon those conversations happened in other companies, but the engineers won the argument?
Probably. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what made me slightly unpopular to some people. I mean, maybe it's the passion. Look, you only have to look at the results. If you look at Evoque, it was
tell us the stats on that. You always used to say it set out to sell 30,000 and did.
Well, the interesting thing now is in the luxury space, you never talk about volume. Because if you talk about volume, you talk about exclusivity, you don't go and tell the press, well, we sold 130,000 of those a year. Because customers say, well, I don't want one then. That ain't very exclusive.
True.
But at the time, we weren't at that stage. But I remember aspirationally, the volumes for that were about 40, 50,000. I remember having a conversation when I was in Russia, in Moscow, doing something for the company, and the marketing guy at the time said, we're gonna change the name of it because it was going to be a last. And I said, I told you all the time it should have been a Range Rover because we designed it to be a Range Rover. And he said, but that's going to drop the volumes. Probably we'll do about 45,000 a year. Yeah, well, you averaged 130,000
for years and years.
For years,
Yeah, how interesting. God.
Because it was designed, and it was these things evolve, don't they? You don't know at the time.
Tell us about these are shocking hacks questions, but I've always been desperate. Every time somebody passes me in a Range Rover, a current Range Rover, I look at that car and think it's so perfect. I can't imagine how you would improve on it. Have you got anything? Have you got a shape in your head that would improve on it if you were still there and doing it?
Maybe that's why I left. I couldn't think of one. But I mean, if you look at that car, if you look at the way Range Rover is evolved over time from its original to where it is now, and if you look at the car you have now, which quite rightly it does have a level of sophistication. It's pared back to within a fraction of its life almost. You can't refine it anymore, free from over ornamentation, real reduction of line. It's got great plan shape, all those things. But we would never have got to that if we hadn't done the car before it.
Yeah.
Because that car informed that one, because you got to that point and then it evolved from that car and the one before that as well. So I think with certain brands, and I think Porsche 911 is another good example of that, they evolve from a particular characteristic over time. I do think to do, another Range Rover like that is a massive challenge.
You made it hard for the next bloke?
Yeah, well, it might be. I sometimes it's much better to start again than it is to try and take that design and just refine it. I think you can refine it for so many iterations in terms of the inside technology, maybe bring some switchgear back, details, but in terms of the essence of its overall proportion, its plan shape, that continuous belt line, the continuous roof line, that
So
formality.
I just
at
look
the
at those
front.
taillights. I keep looking at those taillights.
Yeah.
But I gather not everybody liked those. I mean, whoever doesn't like those needs shooting.
Well, you're always going to get opinions about design. I always say, look, it's great to have, which would probably bring us to the controversy over, the Jaguar ad or the Luce or whatever. People are always going to have opinions. I always say, you can keep you want to try design. They're usually from people that never designed anything in their lives, but that's fine. I can live with that.
Talking to the Luce is an interesting one. Matt and I were having a chat about this. What do you make of that project? The thing that intrigues us is the fact that they got a completely different design team in to do it, and without disturbing the people who were doing normal Ferraris. Was that an interesting approach, or if you'd been there, would you have wanted to have a go at the Luce? And do you think it's a good job?
I think you have to just pull back a little bit. I do, and by the way, I know Johnny and I very well. I know Mark. They're very good creatives, and I think the first thing you have to say is car design isn't their natural habitat. However, they are competent creatives. Now, I've known Mark for 20 odd years. I remember meeting him in the Gear studio when he was doing that concept.
Oh, the little car, Forward.
And I always remember him saying to me something, I don't know how you design cars. He's a total mind, whatever. So he's a great character. But what I do think is where Ferrari were brave was to do that, to say, let's have a look at a different point of view. Here's a vehicle that's going to be all electric. How can a Ferrari change? What can the Ferrari DNA be for a full electric vehicle? And maybe if you'd taken some car designers, you'd have got a similar result, which should have been an evolution of the DNA they've got now, or whatever. It may have not been as sort of polarizing, let's say. I think the mistake that was made, and by the way, in terms of the design, people said to me, what do you think of it? I've always learnt one thing: you never comment on a design until you've seen it in the flesh. And it might sound like a cop-out, but it's true. Because, you can't, looking at it on a phone or on an iPad or whatever, you can't, even with when you know its dimensions and you see it against something else, you've got to see it in the flesh, I think, to give a learned response, and I haven't. But I'm sure that, and then I look at the interior, I can just tell that thing is built to a level of quality, haptic nature and finish, and a different point of view of how you interface with the interior. I mean, Johnny is incredibly bright in the way he approaches that. I think the bigger mistake that was made is I thought the way they communicated it, not Johnny and Mark, but the way Ferrari communicated it was very poor. Because I left thinking, well, what is this? Are Ferrari saying that this is the direction of Ferrari's new design DNA? Or are they saying it's a one-off for this particular vehicle? They didn't say that. So the lovers of Ferrari, of a particular approach, are thinking, are all the vehicles going to be like this? And I don't think they were saying that. They just didn't communicate it very well. I don't think it was, from a brand perspective, the narrative around what this was trying to achieve. I mean, I think if you listen to Johnny talk about it, he articulated it very well. But from a brand perspective, to all the people who were criticising it particularly, it was very difficult to understand what they were trying to do, other than that they were doing an all-electric vehicle and they'd got some designers that were non-automotive to come and do it. And that was brave in itself. But the way it was communicated, for me, and I do think, look, some of the commentary that got very personal about particularly Johnny, I thought was sickening, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had my criticism in my time, but nothing compared with that. There's just no need for it. No. I suppose it's the world we're living in.
Matt is the one of us who has seen the interior. You sat in the car?
Yeah, and you're right. Yeah, like you say, the feel and the finish of it is first. I'm not sure there's a better feeling interior going. I think it's.
I suppose it's that thing of how the question I'd naturally have on it is, has it got Ferrari DNA in it? You know, that's the thing.
I don't know. That I don't know. But I wonder if the reaction to it, you might have thought on this, it would have been different if it wasn't an electric vehicle. In the same way that the reaction to the Jaguar may have been different.
Yeah.
If it had a V8 or a V12 in the front of it, rather than being an EV.
Interesting. It might have been even worse. You don't know.
Yeah.
And well, there's a difference there. We just, on the Jaguar thing, and I'm looking forward to seeing that car in the flesh. But it's not. I don't know what volumes it's going to be. It's not going to be particularly big volumes. Most Ferraris aren't. But whether or not that's going to inform the next generation, I'm not sure it will. I do think that Ferrari need to. By the way, I'm not after the job at Ferrari, but I do think that they need to be a bit more clear about what their DNA is, because you've ended up with it quite disparate in terms of its aesthetic. I don't see a DNA that's pulling them together like you used to see when you look at some of the greats.
Yeah.
But it's easy to criticise. It's much harder to do it.
Yeah, it was just such a gigantic step, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and I think one of the things that looked at, but again, I'd need to see it in the flesh, that from a professional design perspective, that looked quite strange to me.
Yeah,
was the wheel to body relationship. If you Ferraris, or you got the circumference of the wheel, you got your wheel arch is always really close. A bit of rubber, if you like, which gives you that really strong stance. And, it looked to be sitting, to me, artificially very high, but it could have been just been the top. It could have been that one. I mean, anchored probably. I don't know. Now, with the Jaguar thing, all the publicity there wasn't really so much about the car. With Ferrari, it was all about the car, wasn't it?
Yeah.
With Jaguar, it was all about the ad.
It was, yeah. And the badge and so on, yeah.
Well, one thing you have to remember is that, but isn't it great that so many people are talking about Jaguar and Ferrari? Doesn't it demonstrate how much passion there is for great automotive brands? It does.
And also how much awareness of Jaguar and the position it's in.
But the reality is what people were missing. I don't like that view. Oh, sorry, I just realised. Well, I was saying,
for the listener, that's
get over there. This is because you don't want to get down right. What was I going to say?
You're talking about the Jag and
the first thing to say is that people hadn't realised that Jaguar had to be reinvented. It without going into the detail, Jaguar financially was a failure, and anybody will admit that, and that was the reality. Jaguar had been great in its heyday, no doubt about that, and I'm not blaming anybody for that, but it got into a position where nobody was buying Jaguars. It was losing money hand over fist for many years. So all the people that were saying, oh, this isn't a Jaguar or whatever, where were they? Why weren't they buying these Jaguars that they love so much? That's the first thing to say. So we needed a complete reimagining of the brand and the product. I mean, that story with, when we did the cars, when we started developing the cars, we did something like 17 full-size models. I think I told you that story before, but when a brand is more than its products, but products are nothing without the brand, and a brand is much more than its logo and its name. And I think what happened was with that film, it got taken out of context, because what we were saying is we want Jaguar to be a copy of nothing. So that's why you saw all these people that look like a copy of nothing. And then that was related to other different types of communication, which nobody got to see. I think where it slipped up was that it got into a debate about the bigger cultural, not economic, but the bigger cultural debate around behaviours, culture. In America, Musk opening Platform X, say what you like, Trump saying what he likes, etc. And being anti-cultural sort of, I didn't even know what wokeism meant at the time, and it got into that. It got stuck into that argument.
Yeah.
You even had Trump, people say, well, it was this and that. For 4 months, Jaguar was the most talked about brand in the world for 4 months. It hadn't been talked about for years before that. No. So on the basis of that, you could say it's a massive success. And the reality is new Jaguar is not aimed at the masses. It's going to be a particular, market audience. And what we did see is when they saw the car, that sentiment started to change. It was less aggressive.
Yes.
The other's quite, when I look back on it, I think it is slightly amusing, although it didn't feel like at the time. When we showed the car in pink, that was another one. Well, of course it's woke. Look at it, it's pink.
Yeah.
Well, but the reason we did it in pink, and I'll be the one, I said, we're going to Miami, boys and girls. Think Miami, think Floridian flamingos, think Art Deco, pastel colours, pastel pink, pastel blues, softer. That's where it came from. But it got interpreted, so the colour issue became a big thing.
Yeah. It is the case, though, isn't it? That car's been seen, even the concept has been seen around and about now, and there are far, far more people who now believe they understand it.
Yeah, and I mean, if we realised that, look, from a comms perspective, this is being misinterpreted. So, we had to make adjustments. But part of doing concepts and brands, you refine them. A lot of the information we were getting was helping. And, you notice we did the car for Paris in that Klein blue, which was it looked fantastic in that.
Yeah.
We did the car in London in that sort of, I don't know what you'd call that, almost like a burgundy reddy orange. It was one of the last things I looked at and approved before I left Jane. It looked fabulous. And the blue was, again, the culture it was going into, Klein blue, the French artist who developed the blue and painted it and annoyed every other artist in the world because they couldn't use it. It was always linked to stories. But the bottom line in this is that I'm sure that when these Jaguars come out, they're going to be fabulous. And, they drive brilliantly. That's what will do the talking. I mean, when you look back, it's a great one for the history books.
Yeah.
And it almost reminded me a little bit of, I always used to say to people, I was a big fan of Gladiator, the original one with Russell Crowe, when he's going into battle against the marauding sort of, marauding hordes of barbarians or whatever they were. Hold the line, stay with me, because it got a bit like that.
I bet.
It'll
be interesting to see, get a year or two downstream from the launch and see how you feel. Do you reckon do you see that as a peak of your work? You've done.
No, you haven't seen the peak yet.
Haven't I?
No.
Okay.
That's the next chapter.
Will that be a car?
We can come to that. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, tell us about the thing I've often...
Remember, we're here to talk about Norton.
Well, we've talked a fair bit about Norton. But the thing that I'm keen to talk about a little bit is just how you recall your very early stuff, because I have travelled along with you fairly long way, and I can remember the MGF still looks great. The early Freelander invented a new class. MG EXE, fantastic concept car that you could launch tomorrow. how do you remember all that stuff? Do you have fond, or do you just dismiss it?
No, I don't dismiss it because it's all part of the learning process. I mean, I look at certain things and I cringe a bit. If I look at the original Freelander and I look at, the sort of feature line that's on the clamshell bonnet that comes off the waistline, it's got an inside elevation. It slightly elevates up, and it shouldn't, because when we went through the surfacing process, we actually didn't get the sections right. So it looks a little bit wooden, but probably only a few people like me would see it. But look, all those vehicles, I think, were appropriate for their time. I think they all had big impact on the companies and helped those companies, particularly Freelander. The other one was, Discovery Sport. Again, that was very successful for many years.
Yeah.
It's still a handsome
car.
They're selling 135,000 of those a year. So it sort of, I mean, it's almost like there was so much that went on through a period. It was constant.
Yeah. What do you reckon is the king hit though? If you look at that, I mean, is it the Defender? The Defender was another one of these cars that just sort of burst out of it completely obliterated its actual aspirations, didn't it?
Oh yeah, very much. But I remember again, if you do a car and everybody's comfortable with it to begin with, and it's what they expect, go great, it's going to fail. I mean, I can remember people saying to me that, come onto the stand and looked at the thing, you're killing the brand, really. What would you like it to look like the old one? Well, you can't do it like that anymore. There's legislation. It's not refined enough, blah, blah, blah.
That was a point of view, wasn't it? Lots of people wanted to just do the old one.
Yeah, and the old one's got charm. If you wanted a bad back for the rest of your life, then drive one.
He owns one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've got great character. I notice you walk a bit funny. But there's another thing with Defender. If Defender had evolved, like, say, Range Rover had through so many iterations, you would have ended up with that car. But you'd got Defender, well, it was, series of blah, blah, blah. But you had a massive gap. So I always remember talking to the team about it. We need to think about this. If it had gone through each iteration and be a new design every 10 years, what would we have today? And that was part of it. I think Defender's so distinctive on the road. And look, let's face it, that's why everybody copies them.
Yeah.
The Chinese.
But everybody wants one, don't they? Yeah. All age groups.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And Range Rovers.
Yeah.
So to me, when you look at the sort of landscape, because I remember when I used to travel between Gaydon and London, because I've lived in London for many years, and this is really sad, I used to drive down the motorway and I'd be counting how many Range Rovers I could count, at that time, before we had the Defender. And I noticed it was, I'd celebrate every time I counted more. And now, of course, particularly if you go in central London, if you go in Mayfair or, these sort of high net worth places, it's full of them. Yeah.
So what's next? There was obviously you're going to continue to work with Simon and bring distinction to Norton. Do you think that the same sort of excellence is possible here that you brought to?
I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think that it could. And I think with somebody like Sudashan as a chairman, who's got incredible energy. He's only a young bloke anyway. But clearly I want to do other stuff as well. And I've had that conversation with him. Look,
there's talk of a consultancy, isn't there?
Yeah, and there are a lot of opportunities out there.
You must have.
I've had a lot of approaches,
phone calls, all the time.
But I want to be very particular about what I do. I am definitely going to work with other. I am going to do cars. Like, it's in my blood.
I need to see your next car. I really don't. You think?
But it's going to have to be the right ones, the right brands, and it's got to be with people I want to work with. Because there is another chapter yet.
Yeah, fantastic.
Are you drawn to luxury as a thing, automotively or
I
otherwise?
think purely by the virtue of fact, gives you more scope, gives you more scale. Mainstream. I mean, I look at a lot of cars on the road, and sometimes I can't tell one from the other.
Is that an opportunity?
It is an opportunity. I mean, I always look back to when I was a kid, when I used to look at American cars, and then when I went over to America in 1978, well, showing my age now, it was probably past it then in terms of, if you think of the early 70s, late 60s, middle 60s, those American cars had so much personality. They were art on wheels. They were sculptural form. I mean, I know they were huge. The country's huge. And that must have been I talked to designers, older designers that had worked in the studios back then. It would have been incredible to have worked as a designer then. And which is one of the reasons why I went to Lincoln, of course, in 2000.
You produced some fantastic concept cars there, didn't you?
Yeah, I look back very fondly with those. I had a great, I pulled, a great team together. Some people now that have gone on to bigger and better, that were part of my team. I think what happened though is we did all these concept vehicles to show directionally where Lincoln wanted to go, and Mercury, and it was a great vision, but the company changed their mind. That was when they wanted it to be global, they wanted it to be, and then they changed their minds. So
always a risk when management's involved, isn't it?
It is a risk, and that's why I think it's important that as a design leader you have to learn to operate within that environment and understands people's.
I suppose
reasoning.
Norton is an example of a company that is now looking very stable indeed, with the same owners and management and so on.
Yeah, I mean Norton had a pretty checkered history before TVS bought it.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to. Yeah, it's interesting if you look at Indian companies, how Tata, bought JLR and saved it. You could argue that Indian company again bought Norton, saved it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the British don't realise what they've got, and that's one of the things that is important to me also when it comes to art and design education. I've been talking to the Royal College of Art about how we elevate the importance of design education.
What will you do there?
Well, I've been a professor there for quite a few years, and I went to the Royal College of Art, and I've set projects there in the past. But one of the things they've asked me to look at is how can I help them elevate the importance of creativity in education. Where, for example, when I went to the Royal College of Art, I'm a working class kid. It was virtually impossible to get to that higher education as a working class kid. It was only because I was lucky enough to get sponsored. Now, it's even worse. It's virtually impossible. So we're missing a lot of potential, real talent that aren't getting that opportunity.
No.
And that, intrigues me. And I think also a lot of the colleges have become too generalist, and I've talked to them about how do you become more specialists? How do you train the next group of top car designers, motorbike designers, colour and materials designers, product designers, rather than all being generalists? And the other thing that intrigues me, which is what I tried to do at JLR and I've been doing here, is this thing about, brand worlds, because, I said it earlier, most people think a brand is a logo and it's a word mark. It's far more than that. The amount of creative disciplines that have to come into play to develop a brand, you know, whether it's, you know, UX UI design, which is becoming increasingly important, materiality, digital, you know, graphic design, above the line advertising. It's a whole array of different creative disciplines, which generally has been done outside of these companies by agencies, but you never get it truly integrated in that way. So part of the plan is, how do you bring that in-house so everything talks to each other?
Yeah, and how do you afford it, I suppose?
Yeah, but you know, these companies invest big bucks.
They do.
In,
I suppose we're reaching the point
you've
where
had enough now.
No, you probably need a bit of a break from us. But I just want to ask you the killer question. Long career, full of achievements. What's the one that you would put on in pole position? What is the thing that you did or you've achieved that you feel proudest of?
You know, I'd rather put it slightly other way. Rather than specifically talking about a particular design, because at the end of the day, you know, I had great people around me. I think the thing that I'm most satisfied by is the knowledge that I managed to change the way a company thought about design and built an organisation that had the ability to produce things that truly resonated with people on an emotional level. And, you know, I get a great kick out of you know, quite often I get approached by people say, I've got a Ranger, I've got a Defender, I've got this. And it's the twinkle in their eyes of the engagement they have with it. Because you say to some people, I used to do it quite often with customers in America, why did you buy that Range Rover? Say, oh, well, it's got this incredible capability, you can do this. And I know, I've been up mountains in them and all the rest of it. And it's got this technology. Yeah, why did you really buy it? Well, I just looked at it and I had to have it. But what you would say is, if that car didn't have its name on it, would it be so desirable? It's a bit like the watch thing. You've got two watches there. One are equal in design, quality, engineering, design, everything. But one's got a more equity in the brand that's sitting on it. And that's got a lot to do with it as well. So I didn't answer your question because I just find that really difficult. It's, you know, I love them all. You know.
That's okay.
It's not over yet.
No,
maybe,
well, indeed.
Maybe the next one's Brand McGovern. You never know.
Let's go.
We look forward to that. Gerry McGovern, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Our thanks then to Gerry, plus everybody at Norton for showing us around the building as well.
Yeah, it was good. Simon Skinner
really
was a good bloke, wasn't he?
Yeah, really good. I wonder if, I know it's motorbikes, but I wonder if we should have Simon on as a guest, because really interesting, I think.
Yeah,
really interesting.
Yeah, I think what he makes the point for is all the stuff that car designers talk about. So, you know, proportions and stance and surfacing and all the stuff that you think is only relevant to cars works rather well with motorbikes. And these two Nortons that we saw, the Manx and the Atlas, are very good examples of fine design, aren't they?
Yeah, and the things I like about them is that as you say, the surfacing is something that Norton clearly think is important, and the design is clearly important. Somebody said the other day that when I interviewed a designer from an existing designer from JLR, he was saying, you know, design is the primary reason that people buy those products.
Yeah.
You know, people will, when you say to people, why have you bought a Range Rover? They will say, because I like the way it looks. And they will say that first and foremost.
Yeah.
And that seems to be something that Norton are considering applying to their motorcycles, that people will buy them because they like the look of them.
Yeah.
And actually a lot of motorbikes, modern motorbikes, don't look great.
No.
I don't think.
Well, no, because as we learned, didn't we, by looking at some opposition stuff in their design studio, they're kind of race bikes at heart, just clad however they can be clad. Whereas the Nortons were very Gerry, weren't they? Very reductive, very simple, But Simon Skinner had done the minutiae, I believe, or Simon Skinner and his designers.
Yeah.
but the philosophy was very much McGovern's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really interesting partnership.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like Audi, Volkswagen Group own Ducati.
Yeah.
If you said where would that Norton motorcycle design sit in an automotive group, it could sit alongside Range Rovers and things, couldn't it? It doesn't.
Definitely.
There is a. I mean, Gerry didn't do the design of those bikes, but they do. They do look like. It's the reductiveness, isn't it? Which is the phrase of having.
Is it? They all influence one another, don't they?
Mm.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
You rode a 200 horsepower, 1.2 litre Norton Manx. Norton.
Manx Norton R. Yeah, I had a wobble around the block on it. And so
what do you mean? Is he went for a ride with a couple of their test riders?
Their guy who runs the Steve, hello Steve, if you're listening, runs their fleet of bikes. They have a lot of bikes on fleet because they've got a lot of competitor motorcycles, and then they've got a lot of test motorcycles, and then so they run customer fleets and media fleets and engineering fleets. So he looks after a lot of bikes. Anyway, went for a ride around, and it was 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. So I was thinking, I'll just go around the block and back because there's no way you're going to find a decent set of roads around here. Yeah. I'll just be sitting in traffic, overheating and wearing out my clutch hand. Actually found a really nice set of roads for a half-hour jaunt around the countryside. And I'm not really a sports bike bloke anymore. I did have a Ducati 748, which is
fairly far up there.
It puts all the weight on your wrists when you're sitting there, and I don't know. I just it just feels weird to me now that I've been riding sort of big adventure bikes or off-roaders for the past 15 years. To get back on a sports bike and have all the weight on the front again. And I was thinking, I'm not gonna. And it's 200 horsepower, mate, which is way more than I can handle. I don't need... My bike's 60 horsepower, and I very rarely use full throttle.
Yeah.
And it's 20 years old, so it probably doesn't have 60 horsepower. And sure enough, the first couple of minutes, I sort of wobbled off round the factory to get to the gate and was thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to enjoy this very much at all. Within about 10 to 15 minutes, I was having a really good time.
Yeah.
And I felt at home on it. On a way that I had not expected to feel at home on. And when I've come and read the other reviews by proper bike journalists who know what they're talking about, there is a thing they say, look, it is not an intimidating bike for the amount of power it has. You get on some sports racing motorcycles or super bikes, whatever you want to call them. And because the design of them is so focused around the fact that manufacturers and riders race these bikes nearly stock in superbike championships, that ends up defining the way those bikes are like to ride. But the Manx R is 1200cc, so you can't race it because there's no championships open to it.
Right.
So actually they've made it a more chilled sports bike. It is a sports bike. It's really agile. It's really fast. Way too fast for me. But it's not. It's a bike you can get along with.
Good steering, stable.
And you can get along with it. And by the time I came back, I was thinking, I could carry on riding this. This is So brilliant. Sorry, mate. I just had if I paused then, an email just arrived with a subject about a podcast that we published at the weekend, and when I see that, I just get a slight. Who's this from, and what's it going to say? Is it from somebody's boss who says, I listened to your podcast and I'm outraged, and he said something that you're going to get sued over? And I suddenly thought, but actually, thank you, Richard Piper, for your very kind email, which says, what a thoughtful and interesting guy, but credit for extracting so much insight for the evolvement of new alpha models. That's really kind of you to say. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks, Richard.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, relief.
Hey.
What are the highlights of what Gerry said to you, Mick?
Oh, well, I suppose highlight number one is that he's happy because he is my hero, and I look at a modern Range Rover and I just think it's wonderful. So he said a number of things. It was interesting to me that he said that the Range Rover had now reached a point where he thought that whoever does it next time is going to have to start again. Yeah,
I thought that was interesting. It sort of evolved over the last couple of generations and now needs a reboot, which is interesting.
And he said, as we know, he's going to start he's in the throes of starting a consultancy of his own, and he says he's had dozens of offers and he intends to design cars again, which I want to see the next McGovern car. I really do. Oh, and the other thing, do you remember he talked about he's quite matey with both Johnny Ive and Mark Newson, and he gave some good comments about the electric Ferrari. You know, and said that he understood why Ferrari had given the job to people that were outside the Ferrari remit, but he felt that the company themselves hadn't communicated the task or the size of the task very well. So it was a really interesting interview. I think he was much more candid than perhaps we expected, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Because, but that's him. He does. That's what I really like about the guy. You ask him a question, he usually gives you the answer.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that is the nice thing about talking to designers, isn't it? Is that they are very good at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in fact, people at the very top of companies are very open about saying things in a way that actually I did the Christmas. Oh, no, I've bored you with this story. I'm not going to do it again. I did the Christmas road test, and the captain on the boat said, "Yep, absolutely, you should fire the big gun." Did I say this on the pod?
No, mate, no.
Did I not say this on the
give us a
podcast?
story. No.
So I'm sure I have, but a reader will write in if I have told you this story already.
Right, tell us again.
You go do the Christmas road test of. We did a Navy ship, and the boss, I think, you know, the captain of the boat said, "Yeah, go and see tomorrow. We're doing a live firing exercise. You should go. You should fire the big gun. You should blow something out of the water."
Wow.
That sounds fantastic. Anyway, then he sends you off with somebody else who's slightly junior who says, "Yeah, well, hopefully we'll probably get you to fire the big gun." You go, "Oh, fantastic." And then they go off and you get sent down to somebody next down the pecking order who says, "Yeah, well, I mean, maybe we'll get you to fire the big gun." And by the time you get to the person who's actually firing the gun, then they're not going to let you anywhere near the flipping thing. And the further up the company you go, the more confidence and the more liberal and the more open people can be, I think.
Yes.
And at some point, people are worried about the number of bosses they have that they don't want to say anything that will get them into trouble. And that's why I think, if I may blow the Autocar podcast trumpet, we do tend to talk to people who say what they think.
Yes. Well, Gerry's one of them, isn't he? He really is. I just look forward to his future. Well, he said to us, didn't he? I said, "Have you peaked then?" You know, do you remember we were talking about the Range Rover, because I've got boundless respect for that car. And I said, "Is that the peak?" And he said, "You haven't seen the peak yet."
Yeah, that's interesting. What would you do if you were redesigning the Range Rover tomorrow?
How would I change it? Oh, God. That car is so perfect to me. I look at those, particularly, I was saying on the pod, but I look at those beautiful thin taillights, and I just think that's such a piece of inspiration. I couldn't imagine having a better idea than that. I wouldn't know. I'm not a designer's bootlace, shall we say, keeping it clean. What about you? Any?
I think he's right in that whoever's doing it next has got to do. You can't just refine what it is at the moment. I think you'd have to do a bit of a reset.
Yeah.
And maybe you just go, I don't know, maybe you'd go back to putting some more early cues into it with a flatter nose. The trouble is that stuff that you might put in the from the original one, very thin pillars and a big glass area and a flat nose. Those things are not necessarily very compatible with modern standards of things, with crash and aerodynamics and everything else. So I don't quite know how a very tall ground clearance, so I don't quite know how you do it. And also, the Range Rover Sport has taken over some of those cues. The short front, and the long tail. Yeah, it's I don't know what you. I don't know what you do.
The Defender also complicates the issue too, doesn't it? Because that does such a brilliant job of modernity. Maybe you've got to go right back to the original two-door Range Rover and visit the grille, or I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, somebody's got an interesting gig. Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of this pod, episode 205 of the Autocar podcast. And we have some weekend editions around, weekend interviews, Qs and As and stuff too.
Brilliant.
Stephen, thank you, mate.
Thank you. Paul.
Thanks again to everybody at Norden. Thanks to our sponsor, Anderson. Visit anderson-ev.com for more from them. And, mate, I'll see you next week.
Yeah, indeed. I wouldn't miss it.